So we are Echoes of Gaza, a ground-up community in Singapore that exists because silence in the face of injustice is no longer an option. We document, educate, and advocate, especially when it feels like there is no safe space to do so. So today's conversation is one of the ways we hope to spark thought, steer compassion, and remind our society that activism is not extremism, it's a form of care. So I'm just going to set today's interview intention. So, we're aligned, and this conversation that we're going to have isn't just about the 2025 general election, it's about accountability. We are not here to speculate on which party will win or what strategies they'll use. We are here to examine something deeper. So, what have our political leaders actually has done so far when it has come to Palestine? What have they said when it mattered most? And what does that tell us about who we are as a country and what we stand for? So we want to approach this conversation not just from a political analysis lens, but from the heart of the everyday Singaporean who cares deeply about justice. So the ones who have stayed up reading about the headlines from Gaza, who have signed petitions, joined like the online vigils we had, raised donations, and still wonder, is anyone out there really listening? Because within our community, questions have been lingering. Why has our parliament stayed largely silent on a genocide? Or why is speaking up about Palestine often seen as controversial or unsafe? Can our votes shape how Singapore positions itself on global humanitarian issues? Or are we still too small to matter? So with Professor Walid, we want to trace the political timeline of Singapore's responses to Palestine, not to debate, but to remember, to reflect, to ask the questions many of us are afraid to say out loud, because voting isn't just about policies, it's also about values and about the kind of leadership we want representing us, not just at home, but on the world stage. So over to you, Anza, to introduce Professor Walid.
Thank you, Mose. So joining us today is someone, of course, no stranger to Echoes of Gaza. He's been with us for a couple of sessions already, and we are quite fortunate and excited to have him here. Associate Professor Walid from NTU School of Sciences. He specializes in state-Islam relations and political parties and elections in Singapore and Malaysia. And he's also the voice behind the podcast Stay Tarik with Walid, and recently released a timely and resonant book, Why Palestine? Reflections from Singapore. It's really our honor to introduce to you guys Professor Walid. Hello.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm a fan of Echoes of Gaza. I've been saying no to many engagements, but I couldn't say no to you guys when you invited me.
Thank you so much, Professor Walid. I think we are also equally excited. I think for the longest time, Echoes of Gaza also trying to figure out, right, where do we stand in the public eye as well. I think what we have established is we want it to be a place that is accessible for people to communicate about Palestine, a topic that has layers to it, but we want it to be very accessible for everyday people who might not have the privilege or time to really invest their time to really read up a lot, right? So we try to make things as simple, easy to understand, and that's where we are here today. Maybe a quick introduction of yourself and also like a brief update on certain things that you have been doing.
I think I do say this in the book as well. The Palestinian cause is something that is near and dear to me. And honestly, my family was discussing Palestine before we discuss Singapore politics. So my brother's name is Yasser Arafat. I don't have a choice to not care about Palestine. My name is Walid Abdullah, after a Lebanese leader. In fact, which I sometimes mention at book launch, but I rarely talk about publicly. My original name was Muhammad Hisham.
Oh, okay.
It was in my birth cert already.
Okay.
My parents named me that already. Then my uncle who named us, Gaddafi and Ayatollah Khomeini, all this. Then he said, no. Muhammad Hisham doesn't cut it. So he asked my dad to go and change. So he actually changed it. And I think that charted my path quite a bit.
Yeah.
I cannot imagine being a Muhammad Hisham. And I probably wouldn't be as passionate about this cause as I am now. So I really have him to thank. And I dedicate my book to him. He passed on 7 years ago. So that's my uncle. The book has actually, it sold out its first run, 1,000 copies already within a week. And I thought that was heartening because I don't think it's as much as I would like to think it's about me, but I don't think it is. I really think just because there's a thirst for the cause. So any Singaporean who have written on it, right?
Yeah.
It could have been anybody and we would have gotten the same. And that should give us a lot of comfort and a lot of So 1.5 years on, people still want to spend money for this. I think we should take a lot of heart and a lot of pride in terms of how we have kept the cause going, but also just maybe restore a little bit of our faith in people.
Yeah.
That maybe a lot of people, they are just so I don't believe that the average Singaporean or the average human being is mean or evil or malicious. There are some in every society, but I don't think that should be our starting point. I think
Yeah.
a lot of them, they either do not care because they do not know or they don't have time. So we have to invest our time in making them care. So
Yeah.
so hopefully, and really the book is really written for the book is not written for Echoes of Gaza. Right? You guys are already invested in it. I really want to reach the median Singaporean who I think their hearts can be persuaded, can be swayed. And that's really who I want to reach. And I think in essence also that's what activism should be about. It's very easy for us. And I myself sometimes fall into this trap as well. Sit on my moral high horse. How can you be silent in terms of genocide? I still believe that. But I also believe, right, activism is not just about meeting. I don't want to meet people where they are because I am here. I believe it's a genocide. I believe there's evil going on. I don't want to meet where you are and compromise on my beliefs. But for you to come over, I need to go over there and bring you. And that's what I think activism should be about. And we should, as much as possible, give people who, every Singaporean who don't want to get into trouble, but they still want to care, we must give them outlets for this. So that's the way I see activism. And I don't think Echoes of Gaza is too far off philosophically from me. Correct me if I'm wrong.
No, I agree. I think we have sort of like had this conversation before as well in terms of how do we expand the circle further, right? Right now it's already we already have like passionate people, could be like those folks that are already purchasing your book, right? But how do we get the conversation beyond, right? And I think for Echoes of Gaza, currently we are trying to see in terms of the interconnectedness of Palestine itself, because I think a lot of people neglect that being involved in the Palestinian cause, actually it overlaps with a lot of the things that is going. It talks about climate changes. It talks a little bit about capitalism. They might not even be equipped, like what you mentioned, on how to talk about it. So I think for Echoes of Gaza, that's what we are trying to do. I always joke around with the team, right? Like, sometimes I feel I'm not intellectual enough to talk about this, but at the same time, I think people confuse that you just need the heart, right? You just need to
100%.
care, right?
Something I quoted in my book, Shu'en's response on Yalaban. You're just an actress. What do you know about this international politics? And his response is, how smart do I need to be to know that killing is wrong?
Yeah,
The children dying is wrong. I think it's not complicated, right? And one of the things and that's why there are so many dangerous tropes. Like it's complicated, right? It's immediately meant to shut down discussions. These are really dangerous tropes. So one chapter in my book, chapter 2, is I respond basically to talking points, Zionist talking points, or pro-Israeli talking points. And one of complicated. There are many others, of course, in the book. I think we just need to be very wary and also equip ourselves with the tools to respond to this, right? I really think there's a certain set, there's 7 or 8 talking points that they have used since 1967 because we have the truth on our side. We just need to expose ourselves to all the arguments and the counter arguments. And I genuinely believe, right? I genuinely believe I already have seen us winning over people that I never thought would have cared about Palestine. If you look at the profile, it's no longer Muslims. Even you can say it's no longer conservative Muslims. It's all sorts of people that we all would never have imagined would have cared about Palestine. But some of them are more passionate than most Muslims. And that is something positive.
And another interesting development on how community is involved, right? That everybody is playing their part in holding people accountable for the things that they have said or their inactions as well. Last time it's always going to be like people forget very fast, but I've started to see that people are becoming more like, I wouldn't say petty, but we are keeping scores. We are writing down the things that they have said, they have mentioned, right? And ministers liking certain posts. All of this, we start to become more sensitive. But also aside from just I think creating a bridge between the everyday people trying to communicate about cause, we also been heavily involved in the Palestinian Scholarship Initiative. How has it been so far? How did it even started? Also, maybe you can share with us quickly about it.
So it's been it's a lot of work. Hopefully, I mean, it will all pay off. I see it as one of my duties. How did it come about? Because from the start, I was quite tactical. So initially, how it started. If you remember, we go back to October because now we are looking back. We even forget the movements that have been made. Early days of October, very few people were publicly talking about this. And if you remember 7 October onwards, right, there was a palpable sense of fear still. I remember my first post about this was 3 or 4 days after 7 October. And because before Israel started attacking, but we all know what Israel is going to do already, right? Israel is Israel. So I posted something about how this doesn't come in a vacuum and so on. And it got a lot of traction at that point in time. And a few people actually texted me and said that, thanks, I was feeling all of this. Basically, all of them were saying similar things. I was feeling all of this, but I didn't know how to put it in words. And I didn't know whether I'm allowed to say this given the political climate. That post would be super uncontroversial today. That post that I wrote. In fact, probably it'll be mild. I'll be criticized for it being too mild or something.
Too neutral.
Right. And then just maybe 1 or 2 weeks after 7 October, Plan B was the first one to do a podcast on this. Not even Twitter, it was Walid. But I was a guest on Plan B. And I remember before going, I texted some friends, I texted my siblings, and I said, just pray for me because this is the scariest thing I'm going to do in my life. And again, today, I don't have like zero fear saying exactly what I said during the Plan B one. But at that time, it was mood sensing also, you know. But then I realized, hey, actually there's space for this already. And I just started to assess this and I said, okay, there's some space, some movements already. And the moment Minister Shanmugam said something critical of Israel, for me, the door has opened already. The door has opened and I'm going to try to force my way through that door. Once I'm going to go there, right? And I was thinking, what is realistic? So I think cutting off ties is not realistic. No, just politics. I'm not saying we shouldn't push for it. That's not what I'm saying. I am just saying that it's probably much harder to achieve. And also, it's difficult for me to push for that because there are other instances of genocide that's happening as well that probably we are not willing to push for cutting off ties with those countries. So it's just because of that. I'm not saying that a segment of activists shouldn't be. I'm not saying that. I think we need all sorts of activists. The weapons trade is something else. I think the weapons trade, I think that is something that we can at least discuss, put on the table. But also, I think that one would be a secondary objective because the primary objective is to get people to believe in it, and then that one will come easier because the government will not move if people have not moved. I was thinking about trying to get more people involved, and I was thinking, what is something so uncontroversial that nobody could possibly say no to, right? Even Kelvin Cheng cannot say no to, even though eventually he did say no to. It was a scholarship initiative, right? I was thinking about this scholarship thing and got together with a few friends, and one thing led to another, and suddenly we had this. So I was being tactical about it, but when the few of us met, and then we just decided that this was going to be the course that we were going to take. But also, and I was thinking, we want this. There is no way that this will happen without at least tacit endorsement from the government, MOE, universities, but also just the visa. And just the visa, you need the government's at least tacit endorsement on this. So I thought, okay, I know Prof. Ibrahim. And we became friends later on, only after, towards the tail end of his political career. But I remember the first time I went head to head with him in a dialogue. One of the questions I asked, this was 2008, one of the questions I asked was about Palestine. And he said something. He said, Walid, do you trust me? And I wanted to say, no, I don't know you and you're a politician. I didn't say, no, I didn't. And he said, trust me, I believe in this cause as well.
Did that shock you when you first heard it?
It didn't shock me because my default is every Muslim would. I've never met a Muslim who I have and then I question.
That's crazy. That is another episode to bring the.
That's another. I've tried to speak to so many people on this, right? But especially before 7 October, so many Muslims, right? Whether you pray, you don't pray, you drink alcohol, you do whatever it is. When you talk to them about Palestine, there is something there still. And I'm sure you guys agree with me that there's something in our hearts, you know. So I wasn't surprised. I also felt that sincerity when he said that. So when he initially, after 7 October, he was also quite vocal. So, you know, a lot of people would dismiss that, now he's no longer, like people dismiss President Halima. Now you are no longer in power. You say that. What do you want her to do? You don't want her to keep silent. Doesn't it give us some cover that
Yeah.
Halimah Yaakob and Yaakob Ibrahim are saying all of this, it gives us some cover, right?
Yeah.
And we can take it further and run with it. Then I thought, okay, let's get Prof. Yaakob on board. And also just to assuage donors, because
Yeah.
donors also they want to donate, but they're afraid. One of the things the big donors always ask us, has the government approved? There are a couple of other people. We actually approached a few ministries about this. Basically, no one wanted to meet up with us. The only one who wanted to meet up with us was Shanmugam. He actually said outright he was supportive of this.
Oh,
And
wow.
he even asked, and there are witnesses, there were two other witnesses. Do you want me to fundraise for you? And I said, no, I don't want, because then the legitimacy of the scholarship may be affected. But I do want your endorsement. I do want you to say that this is okay, right? And eventually also PM Lawrence Wong, which I am grateful for, that he turned up at our event. All of this doesn't mean I have to agree with every single thing that the government does on Palestine. And that was never a condition also. Shan and Lawrence didn't set that as a condition. And if they had set that as a condition, I would have rejected it also. Just as I am quick to call Vivian out, I'm quick to call Masagas out for his Hang Tuah, Hang Jebat, I don't know what it was, right? I'm quick to call them out. I am happy to accord praise to PM. They are supportive of this. What do I want? Right? I wanted their endorsement. They supported it. It would be unfair of me to not accord them that praise as well.
I think from the start of the conversation was you were telling in terms of the fear, right? The fear that eventually push you towards creativity. How can we approach the conversation in ways that doesn't cause friction and in some ways doesn't seem controversial for the government to also be involved, right? I think it's the same with, correct me if I'm wrong also, Most. I think for us also we were afraid when we first started the first online session, right, Most?
Do you remember the timeline a bit?
Yeah, I think it was right before 29. So 7 October happened. Then in November, first, second week, I started initiating volunteers and stuff. We started with letter writing first to the government. And then I was like, we need to do something more than just this. And I'll just test waters. And that's when we had the first event on the 29th November, which is the International Solidarity Day with the Palestinian people. We saw like everyone who showed up, it was like 50 people, but everybody was like, we need more of this. Having that safe space.
Ironically, I was doing national service when I saw a post.
Moose was doing national service.
I was.
Yes.
I think Moose also was doing national service in some ways. Then Moose sort of gave that opportunity to put ourselves out there. And then I think the scary part was like, should we switch on a camera, right? Should we put ourselves out there? That was crazy. I think we were also very scared for the people that were online. But what Moose mentioned, that everybody was looking for that channel, right? And I think this is where we can bring into the conversation about our government's action and like certain inaction as well, because they were looking for sort of like guidance, right? We couldn't grieve together. We couldn't embrace each other as well. And this is not COVID period, right? We are all fearful, like we are crying under rocks, you see. I think towards the end of our first session, right, both of us opened a question to the floor. But instead of asking question, we have people just behind the screen just crying. I believe it was a Makcik also. You were just tearing up. She said like she just feels so clueless and lost, right? And even Moose, when she was reciting the poem and I think she was breaking down as well. And I was trying to hold it together, right? So you see this immense emotion, and then that's where it's convenient for people that is non-Muslims to say that, oh, this is their problem to manage, right? Education also is one of the basics, right, to really push the conversation forward. I think you sort of like figure out a way to get the government involved while also maintaining balance. I know the stance is being perceived as neutral, but I think what you have shared, right, then endorsing you and myself, they are trying to play both parts.
Oh, of course, 100%. And also the PAP is a broad church, right? So the reality is this also for us activists, there is still a substantial amount of Singaporeans who do not agree with us. In fact, they hold the opposite view of us. There's still a substantial amount of Singaporeans. So a government still has to think about those people as well and think about us as well, which is why sometimes you see seemingly contradictory statements from different members of the government. Possibly because they have different stances personally, possibly also because they are trying to reach out to different groups. But also the scholarship, for me, bringing a Palestinian student here also keeps the issue on the table in a long-term way. So that's why I really wanted that. And I thought it was important for us. Honestly, just now, I think you intimated this. It is very difficult for Singapore to affect whatever is going on in the Middle East. I mean, realistically. Now, morally doesn't mean we shouldn't do it. We should still vote whatever way that our conscience tells us. at the United Nations.
Yeah.
But let's be realistic. And I'm a political scientist, so I look at it just from power play. Singapore cannot even get Myanmar to change. Myanmar is not even a world power. Right?
Yeah.
Singapore cannot do anything with regard to what's going on in Myanmar. So why does that matter for activists? Because this is a talk for activists, right? It's gonna be really hurtful to us if we set expectations that can never be met in terms of what our target is. It can break us. All of us have been broken throughout this process. I don't know how many times I've cried. You know, in the past week, in the past month, in the past 1.5 years. We don't want that sadness turn into despair, because despair is the worst feeling. Because that just cripples you. The despair will make you, I cannot do anything. And if we set those unnecessary expectations, it's not that we shouldn't work towards it, but at least while working towards it, just acknowledge that probably it won't affect anything. So given those constraints, what are the things that we can really do? So I had a conversation with somebody, a friend from the movement, from the Palestinian movement, and I was telling her that the Gaza airdrop was something significant for me. And that person was saying, oh, that doesn't affect anything on the ground because Israel is still bombarding, and what should happen is Singapore should cut off ties with Israel. And I said to her that even if Singapore cuts off ties with Israel, nothing will happen. The Gaza airdrop is at least as insignificant as cutting off ties. I actually think it's a bit more significant. We are talking about the context of Singaporean activists. If I were an American activist, I would be saying a different thing. I think our moral responsibility is much higher if we were in America. Much, much higher. So this is very contextual, very Singapore context. So that's what I was thinking. And I was thinking actually bringing in Palestinians here is also. But if people disagree with me, it's fine. There's space for all sorts of activism. Ultimately, we all should not hurt each other's cause.
I wanted to tap on that because I think one thing we realize in this activism space is a lot of cancel culture. The moment I do not agree
Are you
with
sure you want to go there, Mus?
I would have to go there a little bit.
I agree.
We have to start thinking collectively as a movement than individually or as separate groups, because how can we say that we are actually trying to stand for something that is in a whole community of people in another part of the world while we are dissing each other and we're not supportive of each other? It's almost hypocritical of us to do so. It's also very discouraging as activists. I mean, it doesn't even have to be activists. As a human being, it's so discouraging.
Yeah. So I think that absolutely. There's a few things to balance here. On one hand, we shouldn't be a cult. People on our side make mistakes. We are gonna twist ourselves into pretzels to justify it. And we shouldn't also close the door to criticism. So it started with Gaza monologue. It was endorsed by the government. And there were some people within our movement who wanted to cancel. I perfectly welcome those criticisms. For me, those are valid criticisms. And we didn't delete any of the comments. In fact, I tried to respond to as many when they commented on Lepak Conversations page. So I tried to respond because I think those are extremely valid criticisms. And in being practical also, sometimes you go out of your way. You can always justify things in your mind. I can justify any inaction or cowardice in my mind through the lens of practicality. So I need somebody also to criticize. Where I draw the line is I wouldn't question people in the movement. I wouldn't never question their intention. So actions are fair game. We can criticize each other and so on. I would never say somebody even I disagree with, they don't have the interest of the Palestinians at heart. I wouldn't say that because I know how difficult this is. In our sadness, in our anger, we may make mistakes. We may say things we don't mean sometimes. And for me, I let it go. I let it go in terms of questioning the intentions.
I love that. I really love your approach. I just think that it's a balanced view. We get personal when there's a criticism in place, but we should always think that if there is a criticism from a place of like the Palestinian movement's interest, it's never from a bad place.
Yeah.
It's always from like a good intention, even if you do not agree on that, right?
Yeah, I think there are also layers to this, right? I think I'm looking at how are the outsiders that initially chose to not engage in this conversation, right? They are saying this sort of like infighting. How has that like even pushed them further away from the conversation, right? Or they use that as a weapon, right? They weaponize it saying that, you see, like your people like this is why we don't want to see right? Everybody has a role to play, but it just become counterproductive. And first, I preach extreme kindness. Like I think everything has to be approached with compassion first, right? Like what you have said, like whether the people like commenting on your post and all, like they must be feeling very passionate about it. They are frustrated, they are in despair, right?
Yeah.
And I think that sort of like empathy and compassion, sadly, sometimes I don't see it. I think for you, right, when it comes to, since you're working very closely with the government, when certain activists kind of conduct themselves in ways that the government are not aligned with, right, is that responsibility sometimes like sadly go to you to kind of like explain?
I don't see that at all. So I
That's
don't
good.
see that it's not my responsibility. So somebody doing something and then it's my responsibility to no. I mean, each of us is accountable for our own actions. So the Meet the People session thing,
Yeah.
and I really wasn't criticizing the intentions of the two activists. I really wasn't. And until now, I don't. I know they mean well. And I wasn't even criticizing the actions as a Muslim. I don't, because there was a third person there who was not Muslim. I don't know how suddenly Mothership ran that Malay-Muslim leaders criticize. Since when it became about Ali Muslim?
That's why I was like, also I didn't become religion. That's like,
Ramadan, so,
and all the Muslim folks start to like pop up and like
this
talking
is
about,
something that I've always been against. Like I
yeah,
always say, right, 911 happened. Okay, the first time Muslims have to distance themselves. Okay,
Yeah.
fine, the first time.
Yeah.
By the 10th time, if you're still asking me to distance myself from something I didn't do, right, then it's a you problem, it's not a me problem. Right?
Yeah.
I refuse to, like, and just take anything, like an Indian double parks down here. So am I supposed to say, oh, as an Indian, I condemn all cars that park along double yellow line? Doesn't make sense in any other instance. This seems to be something that is peculiar to Muslims.
Yeah,
So
do you
it's
see the
like-
imbalance in that? Do you acknowledge?
Yes, for sure, it's always Muslim. So I never criticized them. I was criticizing their actions from the perspective of a pro-Palestinian activist. That's all. I do not think that they should be denied going to MPS. No, I disagree with that. And I've said that the government, some were saying that, oh, you shouldn't use MPS for this. That's nonsense. MPS is for residents to meet their MPs on anything, right? I think civility is overrated, but civility ultimately does win people over more than rudeness does. So that's all. I consider it quite a mild critic. I've been talking about Calvin Cheng, Vivian, all this. For me, far more important. For me, one of the things that I also say, those people who hadn't ever talked about Palestine before, then suddenly wanted about the Palestinian activists, I would say, please sit this out. This is not, you have no right, like you don't have a right to suddenly I see. You cannot, you didn't have the right to suddenly talk about this, you didn't. So those who were showing all this moral clarity when it came to those two activists, right? Have you said anything about Vivian and Tan Kiat Hao liking that post?
Yeah.
Have you said anything? And if you haven't, I think just now, Anza, you said we are being petty. No, we should keep stop.
Yeah.
So I think if you are going to criticize those two, you should be even far more critical of people with
Agree.
far more power and far more responsibility, right?
I think a lot of people don't know this, right? But in terms of or maybe certain Palestinian community or like activist group haven't kind of like opened up about it, right? So when that thing happened, us as like a group, like a community, Echoes of Gaza, I think most and another one of our members find the need to kind of like release a statement. On my personal standpoint, it feels like we are trying to distance ourselves, but at the same time, I think we had a discussion before it went live, right? We were trying to understand, because my perspective is they are bringing up a topic that concerns them and it concerns us as well. And I honestly, from that finding, right, it could also help us a lot as an activist group also. So actually, if that conversation would have gone well, right, it would have been beneficial, right? We could have garnered like a couple of insights that eventually can inform our actions as well. So I feel like kesian, that, right, it's so lonely, right? Like it's as if two of them against the entire Singapore, right? And I nothing but like sadness, their frustration manifested to something that people don't agree with, right? I totally understand the minute you sort of like reacted to it and you address certain things. I think that's great also. Then after that, I told the team, okay, like together we work together to come up with a statement that is productive, because hey, this happened, but the work still continues.
Yeah.
The work still goes on.
This is really a reminder to myself, because I still fall into this trap of sometimes, and if your cause is your identity, I think it's not healthy.
Yeah.
And I'm saying this for me. Somebody who has been around 10, 15 years in activism. And I still think sometimes I have to pull myself back. I just have to be super conscious, like the moment the cause becomes me and criticisms of me becomes criticisms of the cause. Right? I know it's not about the cause anymore, it's about me.
Yeah.
And I know that this is something you can never fully extricate yourself. So all of us, myself especially, all of us need to always be conscious about this. So I mentioned in the book that if you despair and if you lose hope, right, then it becomes about you and not about the Palestinian. But also, if you make the cause yourself becomes the cause, right, then I think it becomes about you and not about the Palestinian. So it's a balance. But because this issue is so emotional, it should be emotional. And the fact that we all care about it is because we are emotional, right? So that's why we must be even more careful.
So if I were to jump into it, right, I think with the general election is approaching and considering the manifesto is all coming out, the parliamentary conversations post October 7th also have been quite aggressive. I think, how do you see Palestinian cause like shaping the politics in Singapore especially? Yeah.
Okay, so I want to mention two broad movements, right, which I think are significant. So, on 27 February, I gave a talk to NTU alumni, and I listed 5 issues that could be something to look out for in the election: cost of living, housing, so on. And one of it was Palestine. But I said, 27 February, I said that the government has done enough, in my opinion, to ensure that this is not an electoral issue. Not that it's not a moral or political issue, but it's not an electoral issue. They haven't done as much as we would like to, but they've done enough. It's not that they did zero, So maybe you can say a B or B plus grade, so enough for people to not vote on it.
Yeah.
Because there is a sizable amount of people who will vote on it. But they've done enough to defend the issue. But I also say, but this will happen. A lot of things can happen between now and then. But I was thinking about Israel and Ramadan. I was thinking Ramadan, Israel always does something, and they did as well this time around, right?
Yeah.
But I wasn't thinking of Kelvin Cheng. Cheng, I think, has reignited the issue and has turned it into an electoral issue. No doubts that it will feature at the election.
Yeah.
I have no doubt in the minds of people, I think, and it's not just Kelvin Cheng, it's the reactions to. And I think a lot of people do share this sentiment with me. I don't know how many. It's not a scientific study, but a lot of people think that it's almost as if Minister Shanmugam is the de facto Minister of Muslim Affairs. The stuff that he has said is what we would have wanted our Muslim leaders to say. Now, so the anger towards even the Kelvin Cheng one, he was the first to react, and then all the other all the other statements, which I'm happy to get into, and I do want to get into. Not I'm happy, I do want to.
The comment about the paramedics that happened in the Israel.
So Shanmugam talk about that, and the universal condemnation and so on, which is great. I want the PAP to come on with that. Again, it opens the door for us. Shanmugam says it, we all can do it. But I will say this quite openly. The Malay leaders need to think. People are hurting. People want our sentiments to be reflected. Now, yes, we can say that this is not entirely a Muslim issue, and nobody says it is, right? Nobody says it is. But we also cannot deny that the Muslims feel a lot of hurt and despair about this. And if the Muslim leaders are not reflecting what Muslims are feeling, and they'll be in trouble. In fact, I can tell you, the WP had already contested in Tampines in 2020, and this was their second time. I think Tampines is in trouble.
My ward.
Right. Mine as well. I think there is a palpable, sizable amount of resentment towards the Minister of Muslim Affairs on how this whole thing has been handled. Now, it's because of Kelvin Cheng, of course, but because of the things that happened afterwards, right? And the Hang Tuah Hang Jebat statement, which I don't think anyone can understand. But the point is, that is the response. And also this is the irony of it. Kelvin Cheng, I believe he wrote that post on 9
Facebook. Yeah, and then it was liked by, I think,
Vivian and Tan Kiat Hao, right? But we don't know, right? Maybe
the investigation. So we're still waiting for the
it could be an alien, it could be made, who knows? If Kelvin Cheng had apologized on 10th of March, the day after, he would have found that Malays are among the most forgiving people on earth. But that ship has sailed. I don't think an apology. He doubled down. Just now you mentioned that he said sorry. He still hasn't sorry, right? He expressed remorse or whatever it was. I think he has damaged the credibility of a lot of the. I don't know about you guys, and you guys can verify. Maybe I'm in my own bubble. During Hari Raya, half the houses, we were talking about this, half the people were just expressing like anger at the whole situation. And that anger is pent up anger from 7 October, pent up, and then just exploding like this. So I think it will be an election issue, right? And even if it's not overtly campaign on, I think there will be more people that would think about it at least. And it would matter for them at the elections as opposed to pre-Kelvin Cheng. Right? The
Yeah.
second important development is the WP included Palestine in their manifesto. And I think for Palestine to be an election manifesto, I think that's again movement that we should be happy. And again, for me, this issue is non-partisan for me.
Yeah.
I'm happy to praise Shanmugam publicly. I'm happy to praise Pritam publicly. I'm happy to praise Paul Tambaya publicly. And Zul Rahim, he has been in parliament. I mean, you guys follow this. You know he's been a warrior in parliament on this, right? He's asked so many questions on this, and he's from the PAP. I don't care which party you're from. Even if Gomeng sings about my 100-minute conversation with Gomeng Singh, right? I disagreed with him for 99 minutes, right? The one minute we agreed on was on Palestine, you know?
Yeah.
It was a shorter segment of it. I'm happy to give Gomeng Singh also the acknowledgement. I don't care. For me, this is not a partisan issue. That's where I'm coming from. So, but these are significant developments that I don't think we should just dismiss.
We got, I think, more visibility when that Calvin Cheng thing happened also. I think that also exposed like how outdated the mindset of people's perception of Muslim and also activism really is, right? I think that is, when I read that post, it's giving me like 9/11 kind of thing. You know, it cannot give like that era. No, it's so outdated.
Yeah.
Right?
It's throwback. It's a throwback.
it's
My conversations with actually a lot of young people, and not from the Muslim community, right? And one of the things they keep asking me is, why do you care about Calvin? Why is he relevant? Like, they cannot understand why he's relevant.
Honestly.
So for them, young rational people who not Muslim, you can't say that, oh, this is Muslim, but they just cannot imagine Calvin Cheng is relevant. But unfortunately, he is. So I'm looking now, right, on my Instagram, right, and I'm looking at how many views I've gotten in the past 30 days. I have 600,000 views in the past 30 days, right? Calvin Cheng has 6 million. So whether we like it, whether we don't, right, he's 10 times more relevant than I am. But for us, like, he shouldn't be relevant. You know, we love and we talk about him and so on, but he is still relevant. But the good thing is younger people are not buying. But what really did it was Vivian and Tan Kiat Hao. So
for
that
sure.
reignited the issue thing, right? So it's Calvin and then those two liking and then the subsequent reactions, you know.
Yeah.
Even if you remember Masagos's first statement, where he disagreed with Calvin and then appreciated him twice in that statement.
It's crazy. Why are we like this?
It was crazy. It was crazy. And I think he was roundly criticized for that.
Yeah.
Rightly. And no, you asked me specifically of the election, right?
Yeah.
So there are areas in which the Malay population is high. Tampines happens to be one of them. 25%. That's not insignificant. 25% can swing the votes, can swing the results. Right? In Bukit Panjang, where Paul Tambaya is contesting, it's about 18 or 90%. So I'm saying that even though maybe nationally it wouldn't affect too much, but in certain constituencies, it could affect. And I think PM did whatever he did, right?
Yeah.
And he distanced himself from Calvin quite a bit. Shows that the PAP also recognizes that this is a potential game changer. I think, to be fair to PM Wong, I think he's done his best to reach out to the Muslim community. You know, in Ramadan, you see how many iftars he attended. It's unprecedented.
Even I will go to Geylang.
Exactly. How many have we attended? How many has he attended, right? So he's attended more iftars this year than probably I have in the past 10, 15 years. So, but Calvin Cheng undid all of that. You know? So,
but it's not that, right? But don't you think like how frail it is in terms of our trust?
For sure.
For sure.
So the fact that it's like this can change, right? It means that even though generally I think people do support the PAP, the Singapore population. I think the support in the trust and some of the PAP, even though it's high, it's soft. Soft. So you look at the data, all of that, right? All the surveys show that people trust PAP like a lot. People trust PAP a lot. I think they are still the party of choice. The trust was so high and so high. I don't think today it is that. I don't think it's that. But that's not because of Palestine. That's because of all the other things. So Palestine just happens to be one of the most recent things that.
But I think on the portion where you're saying that parties who platform the Palestine cause, and you also mentioned that, okay, maybe in Tampines and also Bukit Panjang itself, if people are leaning towards WP because they have made it very known about that, right? So do you see that shift that would definitely happen?
I don't know whether that will definitely happen. My suspicion is it will happen for some.
Understand?
Some. I don't know how many, but I
Yeah.
think for sure the incidents of the past weeks have affected the election.
Yeah, I would imagine it's
We just don't know the gravity, what it's like. Also, because tomorrow a lot of things will happen when the candidates go. We are filming this before nomination day.
Yeah, that's what I was telling Moose also. It's very opportune time, right?
So we are gonna find out, and those things will matter as well. But I have no doubts that Palestine will matter for some voters in a way that it wouldn't have done 1 month ago. Right?
No, I agree. I think that internally as the activism committee as well, we realized like stagnancy. People are talking about it lesser. I think even like the boycott movement also somewhat slowed down. And I think even I think Moose have been very trying to observe more in terms of the engagement with the committee, right?
Now it's more, right? Now it's more.
Any more guest out because of what's going on? Yeah.
So thank you, Kelvin.
I don't think he expected this to be, so big.
100% he didn't.
We've seen a lot of like crackdown when it comes to activism. We have seen the increase of it. I think one would be like of course the three women, Kamira and Kokila and all, and also the NUS student, which personally for me, this is my opinion, like it was the most ridiculous thing to do to.
I agree. I don't disagree with that.
Yeah, it's so sad. Even like talking about it, I feel so sad about it because I'm like, okay, I don't want to get into it maybe later on, but that is one. And also the banner that was raised in Gardens by the Bay about ending the arms trade. And I think like the topic of activism, right, of what they have done, do you think it should be addressed? Like I think it's a very significant milestone from like October 7th till now, right? And go ahead.
So for me, the story is a bit mixed. So on one hand, see that some activists have been, for sure, the ones that you mentioned, they have been clamped down on. The facts are there, right? So on the other, there's also a lot of activists who have said a lot of things and have gotten away with it. Have not been clamped down, including us, right? Including us. So and so therein is the negotiation or is how we find space, right? And I think even if like you want to be technical, right? The three ladies, they were charged, and maybe there was some law that they violated, whatever it is, right? I would urge the government just to treat them with compassion and understand where they are coming from. Even if they broke a legal technicality, the law is all about technicalities, right? Understand the hurt that they came from and exercise some leniency. This is how I would approach. And the other thing is, I would say there are fewer release valves. You will get more of this, right? Now, so that's on one side, being critical of what the government has done. So on the other, also there are things like, the Gaza monologues, the humanitarian aid stuff. So there are other avenues also that have been. So it's not fully accurate to say there are no avenues.
Understand.
There are many more avenues post October 7. There should be many, many more. I think there should be many, many more. I think MPS is a great one, right? And all of us, when our MPs come during the elections, we should talk about this. They will want to talk about the community, the constituency issues. Don't worry, I can do with the number of shelters I have already. Let's stop.
Bring it to town council. Why?
Exactly. Like bring it to HDB. I want to talk about this, right? So we should do that. We should do all of this. But again, I want to be just a bit more not objective, but I guess a bit more fair and say that there have been movements in that direction on the Gaza monologues, and I was one of those help Sarah write and edit the appeal initially to have a speaker's corner. So I was very disappointed with it. I expected it. I was disappointed with it. On the bright side, it's across all types, right? So pro-Palestine, pro-Israel. If it was only pro-Palestine, then we really have a problem. We really have a problem.
No, for sure.
So so on the side, but I would urge and also I would go one step further, right? The government should also allow the Malay MPs or the Louis Erns, who unfortunately is resigning already, the backbenchers, right, to stand up and criticize the government on Palestine in Parliament. Not just question, stand up and criticize. And the government should embrace that and then say, look, We have our own, because, and also the government, what they say, right, is more binding in terms of diplomatic.
Yeah,
But backbencher,
yeah,
backbencher can be a loose cannon. If
Yeah.
I were them, I would encourage the backbenchers, especially the Muslim backbenchers.
yeah.
Go ahead, go ahead. You know, I understand what they are doing is rational. What? Because their philosophy is to contain as much as possible, right? But what I would say, this is 2025. This is not 1975.
Yeah.
This is not, and we see things on social and all. There's no way to. You just need this release valve.
Yeah.
So yeah. So I am with sure we need more of this, more opportunities, more spaces where we can express our emotions. And you know, Singaporeans ultimately, right? We are. Their worries is always, oh, what if this riots and so on. It'll take a lot for a Singaporean to riot.
I don't know what's your perspective on this, right? But I feel like Singaporeans, we are really smart. Like we
Yeah.
we understand the nuances.
I agree.
Yeah,
So don't infantilize us. We understand.
infantilize. Yeah, that's the word.
So we shouldn't like just dismiss Singaporeans. So one of the things I really dislike is when people say, "Oh, Singaporean voters are stupid," right? And maybe even in the past, I have said that before, you know? And I have to be honest, in the past, maybe 10, 15 years ago, I've said that before, but I definitely do not think that. In fact, all the results show that Singaporeans are discerning, you know.
Yeah,
Whether you compare across time or even within elections, right? The better candidates will get higher vote.
yeah.
So Singaporeans are discerning. So don't infantilize us.
You sort of like do not put the trust in the fact that you have put us through the education that you have.
Yes.
Make us question to make us learn all these like different like no conflicts across the world and whatsoever. And how can you not expect us to question this, right? And I think that is the most ironic thing. Like, it's the frustrating thing.
Oh,
As
that's such a good point, Anza.
Yeah.
You know, like I spoke to somebody, one of the Muslim organizations, many years ago, you know, and then that person was lamenting. They say, "Oh, you know, the community doesn't understand what we do as an organization." Then I said, if the community doesn't understand, and you guys have been community leaders for 60 years, maybe it's on you.
Like, maybe you are not communicating it well.
Maybe you didn't make us understand. Like after 60 years of
the topic of compassion, right? Because I think we have all this knowledge to really understand the nuances, to really have a lot of empathy, right? But I think the way that we almost like follow the way government conduct themselves, right? And we somewhat have assimilate to that. And I think it's not only you know, it's like condition them to don't care. Like for example, what is going on with the migrant workers, you know, the ferrying of people in lorries. You see what was mentioned about that. And then there were a couple of like different very dismissive languages and passive languages. Even to a certain extent, this whole Palestine issue was being called like a family quarrel.
So I actually mentioned that specifically in the book. I think that was uncalled for. So there was one thing that I praised Vivian for was he was with Netanyahu and he said, "You have gone too far." I do think that was another significant milestone for the foreign minister to say that to the prime minister of Israel. But the family quarrel thing was just,
it's crazy, you know.
It's crazy. That's really the word.
That's the only way to put it also.
Yeah. First of all, it's not. And second of all, even if it was, I thought MSF said we should interfere.
The ambiguity and also like confusion sometimes in terms of communication and action. Then I understand also you highlighted earlier on, there's like this balance you're trying to strike, right? On
Correct.
and
even simple things, right? So somebody might ask, why is it that Minister Shanmugam was the one who said universal condemnation? Minister of Home Affairs.
Yeah, right.
This is a foreign affairs thing. But if you just think of just from a simple legalistic or even moralistic point, right? You would think that. But if you look at it from a political point of view, you can't help but always think like they're always steps ahead sometimes in this, right? Because it's the Minister of Home Affairs who says, because clearly he's talking to a domestic audience.
Yeah.
But also, they can say, the government can say, if Israel makes noise about whatever it is, they can also say, there's the Minister of Home Affairs saying that privately, right? That's not the government's position. If the Minister of Foreign Affairs says it, it becomes a government position. There are always these balances that but maybe also because I'm a political scientist, so I always look at it through this lens. And I remember my mentor used to say, Professor Bill Singh, one of my two mentors, he used to tell me, this is Singapore politics. Nothing happens by accident. Everything is planned, everything is coordinated, everything. So we should always look at it through those. Of course, the government is not perfect in coordinating. Sometimes there are loose cannons, sometimes they make mistakes and all of that. But generally, the default is when things happen, they do it in a coordinated way. So when I saw Minister Shanmugam saying that, the universal condemnation, that's the lens through which I interpret it. But again, that is something I want him to say.
Yeah.
That is something I want in fact, I want Masagos to say that. I want other ministers to say that.
No, I think it's good also because I think right now the perspective, it seems like the activists against PP or like the government, right? But I think what we are trying to do is like we expect better. Like we want them to be good. Like we want to trust and believe that you guys can represent us properly, right? And yet we are very critical about it.
100%. So that's why also I think when they do right, we must mention also. So that's already this whole history of government versus activists. So that's why I think it's important to give credit where it's due.
Yeah.
But also to criticize when it's due as well.
Like they want to be on good terms with everyone.
Yes.
So that's why.
What is the importance of physical presence itself? Because majority of those who have done it, they have been charged or they have been investigated.
Yeah.
So what value do you see in terms of like?
So are you saying legal protest or illegal protest? Which one?
Up to you, which one you want to say. Yeah.
So for me, the value of having a protest, like legal protest, like Hong Lim Park or something, the value of it is that it's not for the cause per se. It's really for the people in the cause, in the movement.
Okay.
And I have attended quite a few from 2015 when I was living in London for a while. There is a sense of solidarity that you get, that sense of empowerment, and just rejuvenates your spirit. You know how it is.
Yeah.
Enthusiasm wins and then goes up again, wins. And so just having that physical space of solidarity, chanting together, Anza, you were in NS, right? When you are marching long distances, you sing stupid songs, right? Why? Right? It's to give that sense of energy, right? And that is what chants do, that's what singing together does. And people say, why are you singing? It's like a celebration when you're protesting against genocide. No, the celebration is to keep us going for 7-8 hours. That's why we have to sing all these things. And it just keeps the spirits up, and after you live a protest or you feel, I feel like, yes,
you do more, right?
Energy, I have the energy to do more. That's the value of it. Now, the illegal ones, again, I don't have the risk appetite for that. And I think my suspicion is, I don't know, you guys are in touch with younger people more. My suspicion is most Singaporeans do not have that risk appetite as well, right? So which is why I wouldn't advocate it, right? Even then, I've never criticized those who went on those. And you know the consequences. And I think you must make known the consequences to people you are bringing along as.
I think because unfortunately, like I think the conversation sort of like, fortunately and unfortunately also, it kind of like advanced further because of October 7th, right? And I think we have somewhat proven that despite the clamping down assembly or physical assembly and all, right, we're still able to continue the conversation and like maintain the energy throughout online and digitally. And for example, even WP, right, that they will eventually share a little bit in terms of how the conversations can be can progress. Even MPS, they have stated also, I forgot which party was it, but they have stated that MPS is really the conversation where the people express. It's not so I think that's we need to have in terms of communication, right? So we feel safe, right, that we don't have to go out of our ways being too creative sometimes in terms of the way that we demonstrate our frustration, right? So I thought like this goes back to being very critical with the incumbent because they have been running for so long, right? So we look at going back to what I was saying, like keeping scores, right? And I think what shook me a bit more, this is going to be one of the few considerations for some folks when they're trying to vote in PAP in, right, is the CCE thing, which you were very vocal about also, that you expressed that is intellectually dishonest, right? When the slides leaked, right, I think there's even like a line that, if I remember correctly, was like Hamas does not believe in Israel as a nation, they want total destruction, right? As a young mind, like without any context, for me, one of the few biggest things that they have done from October 7th, and I think it's just being critical about their actions. So my question would be like, is it sensible, right, for like people like us, right, that have a lot of emotions and frustration, that immediately we vote them out because of this? Is it rational? Is it feel too reactive?
To answer your question, it's not irrational. I don't think it's irrational. Now, I think most voters are not single issue voters.
Yeah.
But for most voters, there's one issue that gets them the most.
Mm.
So there will be something for different voters, and different voters it'll be. So I don't think it's irrational at all now. Okay, so every voter actually looks at party and candidate. So both matter, and we look at the records and we look at what we wish to achieve.
Yeah.
I think voters must think like that. But there will be some things that are red flags for people, right? For saying that I was quite critical of it. I said it's intellectually dishonest to mention because it was one-sided. I appreciated Chan Chun Sing's effort to talk about this when many other ministers were hiding. They were hiding, right? So
Yeah.
from the start, he was fronting it, and
Yeah.
then many people were just hiding, don't know where, right? So Chan Chun Sing, being the overzealous person that he is,
We need the energy regardless. We need the energy, yeah.
yeah. But then, of course, the syllabus, the way he did it was, I think, was bonkers. But they stopped it. They stopped it afterwards. And also, I want to thank him. Like, he wasn't arrogant enough to say that I'm gonna push through this.
Yeah.
You know what, right? So I appreciate that. While I still think that was such an oversight that shouldn't have happened to begin with.
It's not just purely because of that. I think it's like a combination of their their negligence in terms of there are communities that are ready. You can consult people before you activate certain things, especially topics like this. And you know so far how people are so critical about your actions, right?
Even some of these things, right? And as in the broader point here, right? This is not reading the room, but also shows that how detached are some of these people from how we are.
I think for those of you guys that might kind of feel like, oh, am I being too irrational? Like I'm a single issue kind of like voter, right? But I think it's because we have been so conditioned, right? The frustration has built up, right? That I feel even actions like this must have a certain level of basis, right? That is valid. And I think it's just to, like I say, I believe in Singapore, but I think we are so smart and ready for conversations, right?
Yeah.
So I think like going back to what you're saying, that the infantilizing, right? There's like, hey, don't worry, you guys don't talk about it. Let the government talk about it. It's silly. And I think it's we can't function and we can't produce figures that eventually will become inspiring and like, trailblazers, that question the system, that wants to innovate, right? Because there's always like, no, don't do the thing.
Exactly. So the innovation part, society will be hampered by that. But also, just the example you give just now shows that the people in charge were leading the conversation and they got it wrong. They also have blind spots, right? They may be smarter than us. We don't deny that. Some of them. Yeah, for sure. But you also have blind spots because you're human. That's all we are asking, right?
I feel that you guys have proven that you guys do not understand the sentiment or ground. Going back to us just being critical, like before we go to the poll, like let's reflect again, even though it's not within my religion, right? Having Thai Pusam, having a PH, like these are the different cultural nuances, having the heart, having the compassion, right? Should be easy. This should be automatically
and the response was, oh, if we give Thai Pusam, we have to give to others. And I think
why not?
I can speak on behalf of all Singaporeans also, right? Give the Chinese for this public holidays. Give our Indian friends Thai Pusam. It's okay. Let us have 2 Hari Raya days. We are happy. We'll take it. In fact, it's better for us. We are not celebrating. We can go overseas also.
Exactly. And I think this goes back to even, okay, let's not give them money, right? Give them voucher because I don't want them to take the money then go to another country. And it's like, why not? Yeah, like why not, right? And then who was saying it like, oh, why give us 300? Why not 3,000? Like, yeah, I think as much as PAP believe that they are quite ahead of the curve, right? I think, like I mentioned as well, I do give them credit. There are a couple of things that they think about, right? There are layers to it, right? Which I think is very interesting in terms of even planning for Singapore's development with the rising sea level and whatever. Right? There are really great plans that they have placed in, right? But I think going back to the Palestinian cause, right? The scores is a bit uneven now.
And I think they not when I said they, I don't mean all of them.
Yeah.
But I think some of them, maybe even a significant number of them, really misunderstood how much this issue would have resonated among Muslims, amongst young people especially.
Yeah.
So I think they really miscalculated, misunderstood. So that's why also I'm not surprised that Shan is the one who was one of the earliest one. Workers' Party also was very early. They came up with their statement, if you remember. My understanding that is still the most liked post in WP's Instagram history. It could be Step Up. Step Up could have overtaken it. So Pritam definitely was ahead of the curve, but Shanmugam also was. But partly because he believes in it, but also partly because he has the data, right? His
Yeah.
ministry has the data.
They have the whole civil servant under them to do the
The
research.
ground, yes, the ground sentiment, right? Which
Yeah.
I wish other ministers had just listened more to people, right? It's not just the data, also, it's being surrounded by yes men and yes women now. So what I said, what I'm saying about the government, I also don't want us activists going back to us to be surrounded by yes men, yes women
Great.
all the time, such that there is no checks and balances within us. We can easily fall into the trap as well.
There are objective truth here, right? For
Yeah.
example, killing innocent and all, right?
Yeah.
But I think it gives, like I always telling people, like, you need to start talking to people who disagree with you because it helps to build conviction. It helps to ensure that whatever you believe in is rock solid, is bulletproof, because this can progress your principles and your values further, right? And then the second part is like there's a chance to break through beyond just the echo chambers, right?
Yeah.
My belief is of public sentiment, CPAP is unfit, right? It's not about the fact that they are not suitable in terms of like running the country to a certain extent, but it's the representation that is the one that's lacking, which is a very substantial aspect of representing us as people, right? The values and what Mo said at the start, right? It's not only just the policies, the values also. And going back to another frustration that I have, right? The whole humble beginning story. This,
Oh my God.
the Gen Zs are catching along. Like people are doing
Yeah,
stitches.
no, 100%. So, and I think also, right, I refuse that these people don't have personalities of their own. It cannot be. So, but it's almost as if they're hamstrung, once they're like, and that's the thing about authenticity, right? You have it, and people can see through it,
Yeah.
People can see through it. So, don't pretend to be somebody you're not. So I think, this humble beginnings thing, okay, great. But don't tell me that, right? Don't tell me your father was a taxi driver. Tell me what you'll do for the taxi driver.
Exactly, right? And we were talking about Lawrence Wong concert, talk about he plays guitar, right? And then I was joking around. I was like, hey, we got skills future. Why not learn other instruments instead, right? Why not you show off a bit of your initiative, right? They always look at like the grand scheme of how Singapore can be, but they are so far ahead that they lose track of like where we are at.
And
So
also loss of individuals.
now the campaigning is about to start. And I think most of the viewers will most probably ask, right, how do we discern things that are performative, right? Things that, how do we assess things, the intention is genuine? Do we immediately follow our gut feeling after researching to just vote them in and see how the 5 years gonna go? Is there like a way to look at it? Or is there like a better way we can discern their statements, things that they're claiming? And the wayang is gonna start, the theater is gonna start.
Of course,
It's
all
being
parties
consistent
will do it. So the wayang will start. So, and that's a very difficult question to answer because ultimately, right, we can never know intentions. So I rarely ever put a lot of stock in intentions, or when people tell me, oh, they know this person is a good person. Now, I can only judge by what I see. So what I'm more interested in is building institutions, feedback mechanisms that ensure politicians do the right things.
Yeah.
In spite of whatever color their heart is. So whether they are good or bad people, it's really not super relevant to me.
Yeah.
Because sometimes I don't know these people anyway. So how then are we supposed to assess the policies themselves that they are suggesting, their party's track record? So when somebody tells us they're gonna do something tomorrow that they could have done yesterday, then we immediately think, if you had power to do it yesterday, but you're gonna do it tomorrow, then, and that goes for any opposition also that has a parliamentary seat already, and then they say, oh, we're gonna bring this up in parliament. But if you already had a seat in parliament, right, and you haven't brought it up, then I think we can say, hey, you probably are not gonna bring this up. This is probably election wire. So whether government or opposition, I think that can be a standard that we. Then it's much harder for the parties that never had a chance to be in parliament. Still, we can judge them by their public statements before this. Right?
Understand. Yeah.
Because the Palestinian thing, why the WP's initial statement was significant, because point in time, this is still October, October 2023. We didn't know where the public sentiment was.
Understand.
In fact, point in time, you can say the public sentiment probably wouldn't have been in WP's favor when they issued that statement. So for them to come out initially with that statement, I thought that's significant. I don't think we can just dismiss it. For the other parties, I'm talking about opposition parties. We should ask them. And I always ask every candidate on my show, what is your stand in Palestine? We should ask the other parties also, why didn't you mention Palestine in your manifesto?
Yep.
I'm saying this standard we can ask and should ask the opposition as well. We complain about our Malay-Muslim leaders, right, from the PAP, right?
Yeah.
But we should ask the opposition as well.
Yeah.
Then especially PSP and SDP, right? Why is there a dearth of Malay candidates? To be fair to the SDP, they have a Malay plan, a very well developed plan. Whether we agree, we disagree, but it is well developed. So if the moment we pledge our votes unconditionally, either to the government or to the opposition, we lose our relevance as a voter. So we must always play hard to get. We must. And let them work for, they're entitled to our vote. They must work for our vote. I don't care whether you're PAP, WP, SDP, you must work for my vote.
I think for us also, like, I think for the Echoes of Gaza or like those pro-Palestinian like communities, right? Of course, we want them to talk significantly about the Palestinian cause, right? But there is also right, they don't have the privilege and whatsoever to talk about it. And for them, it's bread and butter issue is the main bulk of it, right? And I think for us is sometimes it feels like, are we taking space like that is, rather than focusing on things that can significantly like help people like locally as well in terms of their day-to-day life, like is it taking space away from them, right? But at the same time also I was wondering, like, I mean, that's part of your duty, right, as to really manage your time and how you manage the
100%. And so it's not, I think we shouldn't be thinking about that, because a resident or voter thinks is important to that voter. Now, so if the PAP or whoever it is uses argument, and, there are some people here who have real concerns, right? They use the word real concerns.
Real concerns,
as opposed to what? My fake concerns or whatever it is, right?
No shelter.
So your real concerns, if you turn me down, but you also turn the person who's appealing for the parking summon for the car, and then you also turn down the person who's appealing for a change in course in university. Okay, maybe you have some leg to stand on. But I know for a fact they don't turn those people down. So you cannot say that my concern over a genocide, even though it's a foreign genocide, it's a genocide, is less important than somebody's parking something. There's no moral, political, legal reason for that line of reasoning. That just is not. Now, a person who doesn't have food on the table, maybe you can make that argument today. That one maybe. But that's not the only case you see. So you cannot suddenly pick and choose.
I think for us is, of course, individually, right, the communities, we have our own concern. I hope like doing this with you, right, it also shows the government or like eventually the next government itself, right, the conversations that they can have with different communities addressing more specifically and have more undivided attention, right, to talk about it, right? Because of course they stuck it as like, no, this is too busy, people got more important things. Then why not you approach individual communities, right? Have this session, talk to us, go to us instead, right? Then we go to you.
That's a good point. We should have and this is something that the government can do, right? And let's make this official in terms of our request, right? Have a meet the people session for activists. Maybe you say you want it to be more authentic. Okay, let's not record it. That's fine. I'm fine with that. I'm fine with not recording it and so on. But have it and listen to us. And then you can respond as well, and your response can be robust as well,
I don't know whether the government fear us that we become so erratic and volatile, right? But I think there are really people ready to have that conversation, and we have even kind of like stepped in. There were gaps that they didn't fill in, right?
I think they think that most activists are not ready or whatever. There's only some activists are ready and so on. But even if that is the case, I don't think that's the case. But even if that is the case, you still need to engage them because they care about the issue, right?
Yeah.
So whether they're ready, they're not ready, you still have to engage.
Yeah, and it can help inform their decisions, and
exactly.
Then everything seems a bit more like balanced, right?
And also, right, it's also Anza and Mus, right? It's much easier for us to really hate each other when we are not in person. But when we're in person, right, that there will be some decorum that immediately comes into play, and also when you see the sincerity of that person, even if you disagree, bringing it in person will actually lower temperatures. Online actually it will raise temperatures. So
I agree.
What they are fearing is worsened by the policies that they are approaching. They are using.
And also there's no expectation of answer immediately, like we don't. Like we want
changes immediately. Right?
And then of course there will be certain folks that your pay so high, you want us to do your work for you. Of course there's gonna be, which is valid conversation for another day. But like I say, like I think the Palestinian cause, right? I think for those of you guys who are watching that, what we have been doing has sort of like the conversation a little bit on how people can engage with communities and activists on different facets, right? Like how Professor Walid is doing on like PSI, writing a book about it, and then for Echoes of Gaza, we are doing with platforming and all, right? We are reaching towards the end of the segment also. You have a very long day tomorrow, and early also. Walid, to remind you,
This is my two things, right? What I would say is you always have to on conviction, whatever your conviction is. So if you believe actually that the PAP has done the best job in terms of whatever issues, right? You vote based on that and what you absolutely believe, right? And if you believe, let's say we need more checks and balances, you vote on that. You must never vote out of fear, because if you vote out of fear, then you deserve to live in fear. So that's my the first point. Vote out of conviction. The second point is our votes are, for me, is so sacred. People say it's just one vote. No, our votes are almost sacrosanct. And ultimately, votes or the votes are the language politicians understand the most. Activism matters, meeting the MPs matter, speaking to them, writing letters matter, writing books matter, but nothing matters as much as elections and votes. So we must put a lot of effort. People say, "Oh, I don't have time to." You have time to watch TikTok videos, go and watch. Now we have so much access to information already. We have no excuse, Like so many podcasts, so many this, so many that. We must put in the effort. We must put in just for these 10 days, right? Just put in the effort, right? Forget about your work. Forget about do the bare minimum the next 10 days. But we put in effort to really understand, because it's incumbent on us. I think our vote is so precious. So always know that whether you vote opposition, you vote, voting is the language that politicians understand the most.
Yeah, I feel like in the last event we had, that's what Professor Walid has mentioned too as well. Like our vote is always up for grabs.
Did I mention that? Oh.
I remember that. Yeah, and I think at the end of the day, we know that this isn't just about one election or one issue, right? It's about the kind of world we want to live in, be it in Singapore or elsewhere, and whether we believe our voices matter in shaping it. I feel like that's what the power of voting does for us. So as we close, Professor Walid, like what gives you hope when the systems feel rigid and the odds stacked against those who care too deeply?
That's an excellent question. What gives me hope is see the resolve of the Palestinians. That gives me hope. And despair is not an option. Right? Despair is not an option given up. And after going through whatever they have gone through for 60 plus years, they haven't given up. And we just witnessed for 1.5 years, and we are giving up. And we're making it about ourselves and not about them. Right? Dr. Ang said, if you really feel bad, do something for them. If you're not doing something for them, you just feel bad, then you are. If Dr. Ang Swichai says that, that's almost like gospel truth to me when it comes to the Palestinian cause, right? There is no wiser, more authoritative voice Singaporeans, I think, than Dr. Ang Swichai. So that's the first thing I would say. That gives me hope. And the second thing that gives me hope, I think, is just looking at what has happened. Like Singapore, the default position is a pro-Israeli position, but even this government has moved in the past 1.5 years. And that's because of the people, right? And don't ever say there is nothing that we can do to change, right? Even in the past 3-4 weeks, we have seen that there are a lot of things that people, the politicians will react to public pressure, right? So just in the past 3-4 weeks alone, never mind the past 1.5 years or whenever it is. So just knowing that there are elections, that gives me hope, because politicians will have to want to react to us, right? And the third, I think, is also maybe a more philosophical, spiritual point of view, which is that I believe the next 2 points. I believe in the natural goodness of human beings. Human beings, I think, are generally predisposed to good, predisposed to evil. So you can go. So it's not that you are evil and then the goodness have to come out of you. No, I think you're equally predisposed to good and evil. So we must that people are given access to tap on their goodness more than their evil. So that gives me hope. And of course, God's infinite justice. And I know that the infinite justice will be meted out, and I want it to be meted out. I think it's okay if some people, they have bigger hearts than mine. They want mercy and forgiveness to be, and that's also part of God's attributes. But I
Mm.
also believe in a just God, and I pray that the people responsible for this, right, they will meet the people they oppressed on the day of judgment, and they have to answer for it in front of God, right?
Yeah.
In front of the most. That gives me hope.
Yeah.
Thank
Yeah.
you so much, Professor Walid. Like, I just feel like this conversation hopefully makes people think, in a balanced way and be very critical in the next few days in what they're going to do. And for those who are watching this, if you ever felt silence, know that, like what Professor Walid said, your vote is the message that you can send to your leaders. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's just great to catch up with you, well, it has been, it's also very emotional, right? See where much in terms of a community as well, and where we are at today. I think from our first session ever, me and Moose as well. That was the first time we also managed to meet each other in person finally after so long, right? And I think it has brought us like much closer. I think for more people as well. So I hope that everyone today that you guys managed to have a takeaway from it. The GE is coming very close, and I think hope you guys have acknowledged the value of your vote and the considerations that you guys to sort of like have to put yourself through. And like what they say, just invest your time this period.
Yeah.
After you can go on with your life and whatsoever. and if you guys are new to this and you guys want more introduction into how to talk about it, you guys can find, I'm not sure when they're going to restock, but you guys need to follow Professor Walid for that.
It's restocked already.
Is it already? Okay, yeah. So you can go to the Ethos Bookstore website. They have it there. And also, if you guys would love to follow Professor Walid's kind of development in terms of the G itself, he has been interviewing a lot of like important figures that can really help to shape your perspective and your mind moving into GE2025. You guys can follow him on Instagram for Teh Tarik with Walid. Look, hopefully we can get to try your wife's meal.
Yes,
Teh
okay.
Tarik eventually.
God
Inshallah.
willing, after elections.
I want to try Teh Tarik that your wife makes.
Yes,
Spoken
yes.
about it.
You say like
Yes.
he flex on it. You say like the wife. So we gotta give
It's
it a
true.
try.
It's true.
Okay, thank you guys so much.